Prime XBT is the most powerful trading platform offering immediate access to over 30 assets. Trade cryptocurrencies, forex, commodities, stock indices, and much more, all from a single Bitcoin settled account. Visit the link below and start trading on Prime XBT in minutes.
Birb Network is an interoperable DeFi ecosystem offering token pre-sales, staking as a service, project incubation, and much more. Visit thebirbnest.com/Ferrum. Globe is an upcoming crypto derivatives exchange offering up to 100 times leverage on crypto and DeFi perpetual contracts. Sign up for early rewards at thebirbnest.com/globe. Radix is the first Layer 1 protocol built specifically to serve DeFi. More information at thebirbnest.com/radix. YFDAI is democratizing finance by creating the most secure, transparent, and user-friendly ecosystem of DeFi products. To learn more, visit thebirbnest.com/YFDAI. All right, guys, we're live. I'm Crypto Penguin, and joined by my co-host, Crypto Herc here from the Birb Nest. And
hey, everyone.
We're joined today by some titans of the DeFi space. So let me introduce you to Piers from Radix.
Hey, thank you very much for having me. So hello and welcome, everyone. This is going to be the GoodFi panel discussion on the topic of driving mainstream adoption of decentralized finance. GoodFi is a not-for-profit organization with the mission of getting 100 million people to put at least $1 into DeFi by 2025. Any DeFi will do. Our members include Aave, SushiSwap, Avalanche, Chainlink, MStable, IDEX, StakeDAO, and many others of the leading lights in DeFi and decentralized finance technology. We came together to accelerate DeFi's march towards mainstream adoption and provide the tools and resources that newbies need to get started in DeFi for the first time. I am Piers, CEO of the Layer 1 protocol, decentralized finance protocol Radix, and we have a wonderful panel for you guys today, including Mark, integrations lead at Aave, Joseph, CTO of SushiSwap, Kevin, Chief Operating Officer of Avalanche, and Jonas, founder and CEO of StakeDAO. I'll also be running as moderator for the panel today. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. So, to kick us off, I'm going to give the floor to each panelist and give 5 minutes introduction to what their project does. I'm going to challenge everyone here to make the introduction as simple as possible, pretend that we've never heard of DeFi, let alone yield farming, and see if we can break down what each person does, and then we'll go into the insights that everyone has about what the future of DeFi holds and how we can bring this truly to global adoption. So first of all, I'm going to start off with Mark from Aave. Let's kick off with you. Aave currently is the #1 blockchain application in the world with over 13.8 billion of crypto assets locked inside, according to DeFi Llama. In 5 minutes, what is Aave? How does it work? What kind of users do you extract? And what is your product vision?
Yeah, that's even 20 billion since this morning.
Is it 20 billion since this morning? Holy moly.
And Aave is easy to understand at the end of the day. So if you have liquidity, some crypto assets that are speculative or non-speculative, so a speculative crypto asset would be Bitcoin, most people know that, or Ethereum or Sushi, for example, or Avax from Avalanche or whatever assets, you don't want to sell it because you believe in the project, because they are great projects. So instead of selling it, you will provide liquidity on a DeFi protocol, decentralized finance protocol, and use that as collateral to borrow maybe other speculative assets because you want to do things with them, or like, for example, providing liquidity into SushiSwap in order to get a yield on that, or more simply, just cover your short-term liquidity needs. So you have some Bitcoin, you don't want to spend them because you believe Bitcoin is the future and you believe the USD is not part of the future. So you will borrow an asset that is non-speculative, like a stablecoin, like USDC, USDT, or DAI, like in my t-shirt, and you would spend that instead of spending your Bitcoin, because we all know that a bit more than 10 years ago, someone bought two pizza for 10,000 Bitcoin. And that was a great milestone in the ecosystem, but maybe not the best financial idea. But if you borrow $20 from Aave to buy yourself a pizza because you use Bitcoin as collateral, well, I think in 10 years, nobody will make funny story about you during a panel. So that's the idea. If you have dollars equivalent, you can provide that directly into Aave as well, and you would get a yield because all those people that borrow stablecoins or USD-based crypto assets, they will pay you interest, and there's no paperwork, there's no middleman. You can do that on a Sunday night at 3 a.m. if you want to. There's no KYC, it's permissionless, it's decentralized, and the protocol belongs to the Aave community. So if you own the Aave asset, you own the Aave protocol, and that's something that many protocols today will have in common, that they are truly decentralized. And I think that's good enough for a starting kit.
That's really cool. And what's the product? What's the long-term product vision? What are you trying to achieve with Aave over the next 3-5 years?
Well, I don't know if you remember the state of Ethereum 5 years ago, but would you imagine the state we are right now 5 years ago? 5 years ago, MakerDAO was not a thing. DeFi or open finance, like the old name of DeFi, the boomer name of DeFi was not a thing. Compound was not a thing. Aave was not a thing. Atlant, SushiSwap, Uniswap, all of that was not a thing. So very wise the man who can predict what will happen in the next 3 to 5 years. What I can predict is that we will put all our energy, and that's also a common feature of all the people I see inside this panel, to make decentralized finance and blockchain technology in general more accessible. I have a good example of that. Right now, the transaction fee on Ethereum layer 1, so the Ethereum network, the blockchain, are super high. So if you want to deposit or into Aave or another DeFi platform, you will pay $10, $20, $30. Sometimes it's more expensive, sometimes it's less expensive. But what I'm sure is that it's too expensive for most people. And for example, on Aave, on Ethereum, the average portfolio value of a user is 6 figures, because you need to be quite rich to use Ethereum these days. But that's not something that is good enough for me or anybody in this panel, because when we create decentralized finance, when we spend all that time, that energy to build an alternative to the finance we have right now, we don't just build something for the rich, because traditional finance is already finance for the rich. We want to build an alternative that is sustainable, that is open to everybody, because DeFi is for everyone. That's why less than a month ago, we launched the Aave market on the Polygon commit chain, which is another network than Ethereum. And this market has more than 20,000 users that were able to use DeFi for the first time, because the transaction fee are almost zero there. And the average portfolio of users there is down to 5 figures. That's better, but not good enough. And we will keep working. And when the average portfolio of a DeFi user will be in 2 or 3 figures, we will have achieved an important milestone, at least in my opinion, because that means we have created an alternative to traditional finance that is truly accessible to everyone. If you are a New Yorker making 6 figures a year, or if you are in Argentina and $100 is your life saving.
That's really awesome. Mark, thank you very much for the introduction. Let's go to Joseph of SushiSwap next. SushiSwap is currently the 13th most popular blockchain app in the world and the third biggest exchange, decentralized exchange in the world, with 4.22 billion of liquidity, according to DeFi Llama this morning. He might correct me and say that there's even more now. In 5 minutes, what is SushiSwap? How does it work? And what kind of users do you attract? And what do you plan to do long term with it?
Sure. So SushiSwap primarily is an AMM that stands for Automated Market Maker, and what that is it's an exchange that allows 2 people to trade with kind of like one liquidity provider in the middle, kind of like being a forced buyer or seller. What that really means is that for the end user, anytime they go to make a trade, you don't have to worry about the health of an order book. And so you can kind of like immediately go in and swap and get the token that you're looking for. We've launched a few more protocols since then. We launched this isolated lending platform called Kashi that's built on a platform we call Bento, and Bento allows you to do like yield strategies on tokens that are underlying and Kashi allows you to kind of like borrow tokens in a risk isolated way. Risk isolated lending is slightly different from on-chain lending that we've seen, like in Aave or Compound, where the risk of the individual pool is isolated to the two pairs. So it would only be like, let's say, for example, lend DAI and borrow, or collateralize with ETH and borrow DAI, right? That would be an example of a risk isolated pool. And the advantage to this is that it kind of like it, like in the name, it isolates the risk for kind of the insolvency, and so it allows us to lend more long tail assets. And so like soon we have our TWAP oracles coming in, which will allow you to basically lend and borrow any asset that's on any AMM. And the platform that we're launching today is called Miso. Miso is an IDO platform. It's a token launcher, which allows you to create a new token, have a sale through Dutch batch or crowd sale, and then additionally allows you to do liquidity mining through like the farms integration. And yeah, that's what we have going on right now.
So let me jump into a couple of those topics, because I think that they're sort of really interesting, but they tend to more the esoteric end of DeFi, as it were. So why would someone want to, what does liquidity mining mean, and why is it important on something like Sushi? What does that end up incentivizing?
Yeah, sure. So for any token that launches, there's going to be not a real robust market for it initially. And so these liquidity mining or yield farming platforms, what they do is that they require you to essentially provide liquidity for the underlying asset so that you can easily buy and sell that asset.
I mean, that's the beauty of DeFi, right? Is this like community provided liquidity that ends up meaning that communities who build up around applications, around tokens, can actually also help the tradability of those tokens. And so what you're saying with Miso is that now not only can you do that bit, but you can also launch new projects and use all of the expertise that Sushi has built up in building the quite complicated smart contracts to be able to do liquidity mining and like sale of tokens in a fair way and all that kind of stuff. They can just tap into that and go ahead and launch their new project. Yeah,
that's all turnkey now.
That's super cool. That's super cool. Thank you very much for the introduction. All right, let's move on to Kevin from Ava Labs. You're a little different from Aave and Sushi, as you're not a DeFi app, but you've launched a layer 1 protocol called Avalanche, currently the 43rd biggest cryptocurrency in the world by market capitalization, according to CoinMarketCap this morning. You guys take a significantly different approach to consensus to deliver more scalability than current platforms like Ethereum or Binance Smart Chain. In 5 minutes, what is Avalanche? How does it work? What kind of ecosystem are you building and why? And yeah, and also your sort of a longer term product vision as well.
I'll probably keep it a whole lot simpler and shorter than 5 minutes. It's what people are already used to, Ethereum, but with much faster finality, lower fees, and is, as far as I know, full stop, the only proof of stake platform right now in production that can actually scale up to thousands of nodes and has the ability to become, as decentralized as Bitcoin, minus the mining pools and so on. The one thing that Avalanche, the sort of the vision here is to make a proof of stake platform that is, kind of like ETH 2.0, has EVM compatibility, because the vision here ultimately is a universe where we have multiple blockchains that all speak the same language, and that's probably the most important thing. I think there's going to be a coalescing of the common language that blockchains speak rather than the common platform. There isn't going to be one single platform that is going to be able to hold up every single arbitrageur, every single retail enterprise player or institutional player, rather, I should say, in the space in a single platform. It just cannot scale like that. And ultimately, it comes down to scaling the same way the internet scaled, of having multiple entities that provide the same infrastructure, just in a horizontally scalable way, but they all speak the same language. And in this case, happens to be Solidity, EVM, and Avalanche is taking the play that in the future we're all going to coalesce in the same language. In this case, Solidity and the Ethereum virtual machine, for better or for worse. But it provides a separate infrastructure that people can route their requests and their trades uses to from Ethereum or Matic or Polygon over to Avalanche seamlessly. And that's sort of like a really powerful vision for the way that we see scaling happening in the future for DeFi. The goal is to have Avalanche be a critical part of that, where whenever there is load on Ethereum or on the really most of Ethereum right now, requests are routed almost seamlessly onto Avalanche, and it becomes kind of like an efficient place where other people can take their requests that are overloaded on Ethereum over on Avalanche.
So can you think of it like a layer 2 for scaling purposes, or is it? I mean, I know it is a layer 1, but like under what circumstances would you move things across to Avalanche from Ethereum, and like how do you sort of leverage the scalability of Avalanche via Ethereum? Yeah,
I'm very confused. I mean, I come from a PhD in distributed systems, and this whole layer 1, layer 2 thing, it's like basically what Twitter talk. It's whatever people come up with. There isn't like a clearly defined definition. I don't know what any of this is, but Avalanche looks like, frankly, like the interface of what Matic provides. It's EVM compatible, except that it's not a multi-sig. It's a layer 1. Although weirdly enough, right now, if you wanted to move stuff over to Avalanche, there are bridges, and one of the more popular bridges happens to be effectively multi-sig. So if you move from Ethereum over to Avalanche right now through one of the more popular bridges, it looks kind of like sending your assets from Ethereum over to Matic. And ultimately, when your assets are over on the other side, they're secure. They're secured by a layer 1, not by multi-sig. But it looks identical. And so I don't really know whether it's Avalanche is a layer 1 or a layer 2, or if Avalanche is the layer 1, Ethereum is the layer 2. I don't know if that makes sense. It's just like, rather, to me, it's a platform where EVM dApps can run. Ethereum is the same exact thing. And there needs to be there are already ways for things to move back and forth, although it's a little bit expensive right now, actually, frankly. But yeah, that's what it looks like.
That's really cool. All right. Thank you very much for that introduction, Kevin. Let's move on to Jonas from StakerDAO. StakerDAO is a decentralized autonomous organization with $111 million of crypto under management, and offers a bunch of new tools to people who want to get into the wonderful world of decentralized finance. So, Jonas, in 5 minutes, what is StakerDAO? How does it work? What kind of users do you attract, and what's your product vision?
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me here, guys, and I'm excited to be working on GoodFi with all you guys. So we're building the first layer 5 network. Only kidding. So StakerDAO is essentially about empowering layer 1 networks that are focused on staking to get into the DeFi game. So essentially, I would kind of say we're layer 1 agnostic from a platform perspective. We're trying to essentially build tools on staking blockchains so that they can take advantage of all the cool kinds of opportunities that are starting to emerge and that have emerged on Ethereum. And we're building bridges between those layer 1 networks and to Ethereum so that holders of those kind of core tokens on those layer networks can in fact have an opportunity to chase yield wherever the best yield happens to be. And we're just getting started with this project. So far, we've built some tools and some bridges on a handful of networks, which include Polkadot, Cosmos, Tezos, and Algorand. Those are the 4 networks that StakerDAO's community has chosen to focus on so far. And what we're building really breaks down into 3 categories. The first category is wrapped tokens and bridges. So we think that if you are let's say a Tezos token holder, and you've been patiently staking your Tez, or baking them as they call it in the Tezos ecosystem, for the last year and a half, and you've been earning a yield from a staking perspective, you want to get those tokens involved in DeFi, and you've been seeing what's been going on in other chains, and longingly wanted to know when that was going to happen for your chain. So what we've launched for that kind of ecosystem is a protocol on Tezos that will allow Tezos holders to basically wrap their Tez, continue to get their staking yield, continue to provide the underlying security for the protocol itself, but they're borrowing a wrapped version of that token that they can then use in our bridge to bridge it over to Ethereum to participate in Ethereum-based DeFi. So there's now a wrapped Tez product on Ethereum that is starting to grow, that people are using to move into Sushi or move into any of the other platforms that we're talking to here today. So that's kind of the first set of functionality. The second set of functionality that the community is building is designed to help non-technical people, less crypto-focused people get exposure to the proof of stake space as well. And that's with index products, if you will. So the first index products that the community launched is a basket of proof of stake tokens. It's called the Blend token. It's available on Ethereum. And if you hold a Blend token, you're essentially holding an underlying position in a growing basket of proof of stake tokens. Today, that basket includes Tezos, Cosmos, and Algorand. A new proposal has just flown through our governance system that's being discussed right now to add Polkadot to that basket. I think many other proof of stake tokens will be added to that basket over time. But it's a way to get exposure to the general proof of stake space without having to become an expert on wallets and staking and bridging and all that kind of stuff. So we've got the wrap products, we've got the index products that we're building, and then the goal for the community is to kind of wrap all that in governance, much like what we've been talking about from decentralization here. We now have a governance token, which is our staker token. It's used to make proposals and to vote for spending our treasury. And so far, the community has approved 5 or 6 different proposals and spent a couple $1 million worth of the treasury to build new products, hire engineering teams and build those products. And so that's kind of where our community is today. As I mentioned, we're compared to the other names on the panel, we're just getting started as the platform goes, but we're really excited about, empowering DeFi to all the corners of the crypto ecosystem where users are for whatever reason they've decided that that's where they want to plant their flag.
That's really awesome. That's really awesome. Thank you very much for that introduction. All right, so I'm going to move on to quickly introduce myself and the Radix project, and then we will get started with the panel. We have some questions from the audience as well as some questions I've put together. So we'll be going through both of those and giving everyone an opportunity to tell us what they think about how we're going to get DeFi mainstream. Quick introduction to Radix. Radix is a layer 1 protocol built specifically for decentralized finance. We like to say it's layer 1 DeFi done right. The goal of Radix is to provide the technology foundations for a new decentralized global financial system. And we realized that to do this, we needed to solve 3 core problems that is facing decentralized finance today. The first is to do with developers. Right now, developers on Solidity spend up to 90% of their time securing applications, only 10% of their time building applications. And yet we've still had over $285 million of hacks to date. We think that's entirely unacceptable. And so what we did is we built a new programming language called Scripto, which is entirely designed to make building decentralized finance as easy as possible. We think flipping those two numbers, 10xing developers' productivity, is ultimately going to mean that the space can accelerate much faster than it is today. Secondly, a big problem we see is decentralized finance is entirely dependent on open source code. You can't build secure decentralized finance applications without open sourcing your code. And indeed, the community of developers that build these applications rely on the open source code. That in itself is fantastic. Open source is one of the biggest and most important endeavors that humanity has ever tried to build together. But fundamentally, we realize that you actually need to build better incentives into these systems. So on Radix, there's this concept called developer royalties. If you build a fantastic component that goes into a decentralized finance application and becomes successful and makes it easy for users to come into decentralized finance, then you as the developer who built that component will receive a royalty every time the product is used. And that's baked right into the center of Radix, right actually into our execution environment. We don't use the EVM. We threw that away because it's fundamentally insecure. Instead, we use something called a finite state machine, which allows you to create much more efficient, much more scalable, much more secure applications on top of it. But it also gives you the ability to instantiate these components that you can get royalties from the back of. And then the third problem that we solve is this issue of scalability, and specifically the scalability of decentralized finance applications. What we're seeing in Ethereum is essentially the problem of too much success of application to application scalability. All of these applications in DeFi want to use each other, want finance to be able to flow between them, and that ability to compose together Uniswap and Aave and SushiSwap and all of these different financial products in single block operations, which is something called composability or atomic composability if it happens in a single block, that is currently threatened by all of the ways that we're currently talking about scaling. So most ways in which people approach sharding breaks atomic composability. Most ways in which people approach things like layer twos also breaks atomic composability. We built our consensus algorithm specifically not to break atomic composability and allow it to really take the power of our Radix engine, which is our equivalent of the EVM, to create massive scalability, massive linear scalability of DeFi applications without breaking some of the most important components of it. So that's Radix in a nutshell. What we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the panel discussion. And first question for the panelists, to open this up, I'm going to give it to Joseph. Why do you think the GoodFi mission of getting 100 million users into DeFi by 2025 is so important?
I think that banks in the traditional financial system is abusive of poor people, and it doesn't really have their interests at heart, and intentionally manipulate the system in such a way that makes it either they're unable to access it, or if they're able to access it, they can only access it at like usurious rates.
So like the idea that there's one rule for rich people and there's another rule for poor people, be that like accredited investor status or just the ability to access a universe of financial products that aren't available to general retail people.
Totally, and like I'm speaking from the perspective of someone in the United States. Right. Like so it may be different other places, but like bank yields are terrible. In fact, you will. There are no vehicles that you can access in a bank that will outpace inflation, and so you're essentially having your money taxed by having it be in a bank account. The bank is lending it as well, and they're making yield on that on top of you, and then on top of that, there are additional circumstances where they charge fees to these kind of they're less wealthy users.
Right. Absolutely. Kevin.
Yep.
What about yourself? Why do you think that getting 100 million users into DeFi as quickly as possible is important?
I mean, I don't know that as quickly as possible is important. I think there is an interesting thing happening here that is currently not available in mainstream finance. And I think what effectively ultimately it comes down to is not necessarily the yields or any of that kind of stuff. For me, at least personally, it comes down to more about just the pace of iteration and innovation that comes from DeFi that doesn't exist in traditional finance. It can come because, or rather, you could say that it comes in DeFi because there is a lot of players that don't necessarily ascribe to the complexities of the regulatory environment in traditional finance, and so they're making all kinds of new interesting things happen. But I think that's part of the innovation that always happens across every single industry. Some new players come in, they start innovating, and everything kind of changes all at once. And I think what's happening with DeFi right now is innovators coming in and saying, we're just going to build everything from scratch. We're going to just take over everything. We're going to redo everything properly. And we're going to do it through infrastructure that requires no permission. And so there's nobody to ask, to go out there and say, can we pretty please do this? And that's a really powerful thing that DeFi has. And obviously there is opportunities for this to be abused hugely and has been abused. And as long as that is curtailed down to a minimum, and DeFi is not being abused any more than very highly regulated traditional finance is, then the power of DeFi is tremendous, because now developers and innovators can come in and can iterate really quickly, and that's a really powerful thing. So I don't know that it's necessarily about I guess the users coming into DeFi is important because it establishes the legitimacy of DeFi.
Right.
But naturally, we got to be prepared about the negative impact that can come from people that don't want traditional finance to be disrupted.
It kind of feeds each other, right? Like the users coming into space, bringing assets, inspire new developers to come into the space and build products, and then you get this sort of like virtuous cycle. But you're right, there's plenty of examples of things that are sort of negative in decentralized finance, like things like rug pulls and honeypots and unscrupulous projects.
I see DeFi very close to resembling like the same thing that happened to the movie and the music industry. It was a highly regulated, everything was on record labels. You had to request permissions for everything, to do anything on the internet with music, and it was just a complete, just non-starter. The RIAA, whatever, the recording record label industry. And I remember being part of the early days of when the internet and the innovators came up and said, look, this is crazy. We're just going to start streaming music and videos and everything. And then it forced the regulation to change dramatically. And because of that craziness, because of that innovation, the Wild West that happened with the music and movie industry, it's now why we have Netflix and Spotify and all these things, and which are incredible to have. Without that innovation, we probably would still be having the RIAA control every single thing and have a monopoly, and it'd be disastrous. So that's what's deeply important about DeFi. It looks identical to me.
There's this concept in politics called the Overton Window, which is this idea that if you want to move what is politically acceptable to believe or in like normal society to talk about as a political viewpoint, then you need to move to the extremes in how you, if you're a politician, in how you talk about the issues you care about, to move the generally accepted boundaries one way or another. And this is, you see this happening all the time in the US. And I feel like some of this is a little bit what happens with the regulator, in that the regulator or the industry responds to what has already happened. Often you get serious crackdowns, but that still means that at the end of it, you end up with the balance between high innovation and like consumer safety, which is kind of what the constant balance is here. Jonas, do you have any do you have any views on like why 100 million users into DeFi is an important target, and why we should be working towards it?
Piers, I was just thinking with your Overton Window story there. I've been framing things in my mind about kind of what's going on. Why is this all happening now? kind of about the path of humanity, decentralization from a humanity perspective, right? And I have always kind of thought like the 20th century represented maybe what I would call peak centralization, right? Like everything grew really big in the 20th century. Big governments, big companies, big university institutions. It all grew really big. It all got really centralized. Ronald Coase's theorem of the size of the organization is correlated with the cost of managing information. We just went through the Industrial Revolution, right? And everything got huge in the 20th century because it made sense to.
Right.
But if you think about that from that Overton window perspective, that was kind of like the Overton window was like, let's pull everything as far as possible to centralization and organize things as big as possible to get humanity to move forward. And that's what happened. And then all of a sudden the internet came out, right? And that was the first element of, or maybe not the first one, but it was an early element of bringing back decentralization and bringing back distributed management of things. Because I mean, for 20,000 years, right, we all lived in villages and in tribes and stuff like that, before peak centralization happened. And so it only makes sense that we're going to have to slide back in that direction as well, right? And so
I don't think it's inevitable. I don't think it's inevitable. I think that I think it's preferred, but I think that there are forces at work to prevent that happening. Like, things like consortium chains, things like government chains, things like Facebook doing their own chain. I think those things are potentially forces against that. And I think that we continue to need to make good arguments as to why decentralization matters, why that is the right trending. But yeah, I agree. It's good that it's moving that direction. I just don't think it's necessarily inevitable.
Well, certainly those of us who are all out on the forefront building the technology are pushing hard to make it inevitable, I think. Certainly just the evolution of blockchain in general has been a huge step in helping make it push towards inevitability of decentralization. But it is somewhat fearful that it could go in the Black Mirror scenario where we have decentralization, but it's really all theater, essentially. So, yeah.
Cool. And lastly, Mark, why do you think getting 100 million users into DeFi is an important goal?
Well, the first thing is that why are you so conservative? Like 2025, 100 million users. Are you talking about it's November? Like if we stay conservative, like 2025, come on. That's the first thing. The second thing is that there's a lot of, I think people don't realize that like DeFi, like decentralized finance already reached like some kind of escape velocity. Like there's the world market grew in 9 months from $1 billion to $120 billion, like the ecosystem. And now you have like multiple networks that are fully functional. So you have Ethereum, obviously. You have the Binance Smart Chain with a lot of users there, a lot of TVL there. Some people like it, some people don't like it. And it's a spectrum. You have Avalanche with a full ecosystem as well. Polygon recently that we launched a lot of platforms like SushiSwap. Joseph, how many platforms Sushi is deployed? You have Ethereum, Phantom, Polygon, Avalanche, BSC as well?
Yeah, OKEX. Hang on, we got a list here. But yeah, OKEX, Harmony, Hecko, XDAI, and
unstoppable,
BSC.
guys.
Yeah,
it's unstoppable. There's many actors out there. There's many community out there. There's many needs, and there's an offering tailored for everyone needs. Because when we say DeFi is for everyone, what we have to understand is that DeFi should be accessible to someone in Venezuela with like $10, like the equivalent of $10, and he should have access to a network that is cheap enough with an RAM that is cheap enough that $10 will not be the way for him to be a millionaire, but the way for him to beat the local inflation because his local currency is not good enough. And the same thing, for example, in Eurasia with Turkey. That's what is happening right now, closer to me as a French. But also for a Swiss bank. Like a Swiss bank should be able to access DeFi as well. Maybe not in a fully permissionless market, but in a permissioned market. And that's what was announced with Aave recently, to say, okay, we have a way, like right now, if we are depositing at the central bank some or cash reserve, the central bank will take 0.5% per year to our customer, and then we have to charge back our customer, and then our customer are pissed because it's been since 2008 that we are the villains in the story as a bankers. So maybe we need to find some alternative to avoid the revolution, because even if the law is on our side, the people are not on our side since more than a decade ago. So let's try to find some innovation, and they are DeFi actors as well, with some certain needs, sometimes certain requirement like compliance, these kind of things. And there's going to be a market for everyone. And it's already happened. I think we already proved some product market fit, because you cannot grow from 1 billion to more than 100 billion just on retails, just on geek on the internet, playing on the centralized exchange and buying the dog and TikTok coins. You grow to that number as well with hedge funds, banks, institutions. We spend years in crypto to say institutions are coming. Well, guess what? Institutions are there, and there are more institutions coming inside the ecosystem every day. They bring good things, they bring bad things, they move the ecosystem around. And as the whole thing is a spectrum, there's going to be like many ways and many shape and forms of what we call DeFi today. And I think there's going to be something for everyone. But it's there, and it's not going anywhere. Like, it reached product market fit and escape velocity already.
That's a really interesting perspective. Thank you. I'm gonna move on to the next question, which is one from the audience, which I think dovetails really nicely into your points, Mark, which is, so the question is, will GoodFi actively work with anyone in the legacy financial world? I'm going to slightly change that to, because we're not actually at the moment, should we, and should the industry look to be working more with the legacy financial system as well? Let's start off that question with Mark.
Yeah, it's already happening, as I said. And I think the boundaries and the definition of what is DeFi, what is CeFi, what is CDeFi, so centralized finance, traditional finance, decentralized finance, will evolve over time. I think we should not be binary about this. We should have our own ethos, and it's very important to me. Like, decentralization is not a theater or just something we say on the internet. For me, it's like something that is actually really important. That you have permissionless protocol, that are trustless protocol, that you don't have an entity that can nuke your position and take your money away from you just because they don't like you or because they consider you a bad guy. But I do realize that in the world we live in, it's not something that is inside the comfort zone of every institution. So we will see appear more and more permissioned markets in opposition to what we have right now, mainly a permissionless market. But DeFi is about freedom, and freedom is the choice. So as an individual, you have the choice to decide, I want to go there or there. I take the left door or the red door. The right door will be permissioned and left door will be permissionless. If you still have the choice, that's good enough for me. And I know which door I will take as an individual because I have my own belief. But I can understand that on the right door there's a very simple, fancy mobile app that look like a neobank or something like that. And they don't tell me transaction fee or seed phrase or fancy word like that that is super complex. I understand that some people might one day take that door. But what is really important to me is that as actor of the ecosystem, we continue to educate people and keep the left door open to everyone.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's sort of what the purpose, like one of the reasons that I think GoodFi is so important is that you like the purpose of GoodFi is to actually educate you on what you're holding, like give newbie tools, because I think at this stage of the industry, like I often compare it to like the early days of the internet. When you wanted to get on the internet, when you wanted to make the internet into a thing, you had to get people to buy a computer, install the internet to their house, and then use this new thing called a browser. All of those were difficult. Like none of those were easy steps. They all required convincing, and they required passionate people to convince them. And like we're at that stage where we just need to build those evangelists, those people who are going to push forwards. And I think that like going and talking to institutions and getting them to be evangelists is just as important. Oh, my video has just died. I'm going to throw the question over to Joseph. How about you? Do you think we should be pursuing institutionals, pursuing traditional finance as well?
Sure. So coming from a bank, I say no. That was my career before I went like full head on into crypto. The reasoning being is blockchains and crypto and decentralized finance, maybe before they even had some of those names, all have reached out to banks. And the reason that we have an ecosystem like Maker and DAI for stable coins is because for a long time, you couldn't have these platforms to do custody of dollars and then issue some sort of token on chain for that token that it has under custody. And so essentially, one of the major things that we would have benefited from a bank, which is like holding custody of funds or something, holding custody of assets, is really irrelevant now because we've kind of done this with over collateralization. I mean, having been inside a bank, they are running on software systems that were written in the 1970s. Many of them run on COBOL mainframes that are now emulated on IBM computers. Takes them a long time to move anything. In fact, credit card transactions I remember were on a 15-minute delay, and so we had to cache some of the values at that server, and so that sort of stuff is just incompatible, right? And so if they want to come and join, fine, right? But I don't think that any outreach is necessary. I think what we have to offer is now a lot more powerful than what they have to offer.
Super interesting. Cool. Kevin.
Yeah, I also I would tend to agree here with Joe. Yeah, I think the products here are very compelling. What traditional finance ends up doing is very opaque. It's very, manipulative of clients in a lot of ways, a lot of times. And I think what DeFi is building in a lot of ways is bringing back transparency and power back to users and giving them the clear choice of not having middlemen that take a lot of the fees, but they just get to lend their own money and they get to do their own financial strategies directly without having to deal with any middlemen. And going back to traditional finance, to me, that just sounds like going back to lack of transparency and more middlemen, and that's definitely not the path that we should take.
Awesome. And lastly, Jonas.
So I think that the DAO model that we're building here, where the users are the owners, are the builders, essentially, like that's fundamentally incompatible with 20th century architectures of the corporation. And I don't think that there's going to be an ability for them to evolve to get to the DAO model. It's just not going to happen. It's going to be a wholesale replacement of the corporation by the DAO over the next 20 years, 30 years.
And why do you think the DAO model particularly is so powerful? Like what advantages does it have over the corporate structure?
I think it is an extremely powerful way to align incentives among a larger group of participants. And I think that, equity holders in 20th century corporation, VC capital investors, they all have the power of the purse. They all have the ability to kind of sit back and let somebody else do the work for them, and then be able to live off the back of engineers' efforts essentially. And I think the DAO model restructures how that all works, and it makes it a lot more rewarding to be the owner, user, builder essentially. And I think that's going to just be more fair over time.
Vinay Gupta has this wonderful idea that he talks about, which is this. So Vinay Gupta, one of the founders or co-founders of Ethereum, he talks about us moving from lawyer capitalism to programmer capitalism, and this idea that the programmer becomes the center of the economy rather than the lawyer. I think that there's probably some shades of gray there, but that definitely seems to be the direction that we're heading. Cool. All right, let's move on to the next question, which is, how do you explain, or how would you explain, if you haven't yet, decentralized finance to your parents? How would you explain it to a 5-year-old if different? So let's start with Joseph.
Shoot. Okay. Like for my parents, I like, one of the things that I typically ask people is, why do they need a bank? Like, why do you use a bank? And a lot, like, typically the answer that I receive back is something around, I want my money to be safe, from theft. And that's really where the reasoning breaks down. There's nothing else. The interest rates are not good. They're kind of like taking your money and using it. And so when I tell them that, like, is it really safe? If you're a poor person, is your money really safe at a bank, right? Like, you're going to get hit with with fees for not having a high enough balance to the point that it will make the bank account insolvent eventually. And so is it safer at a bank? Most poor people are safer putting money under their mattress than they are to put it into a bank. And I think decentralized finance is powerful in such a way that allows you to have the self-custody, like protection level like you would receive at a bank, but the flexibility of you holding the asset yourself. That's probably what I would say about decentralized finance for my parents. For a 5-year-old, I don't know what's a 5-year-old doing in banking, right? They might be working on the Rari Capital team.
Just put money there from the Tooth Fairy.
Yeah, like, the thing that I love that's like, they understand the digital economy already, right? They're buying Fortnite skins and CS:GO skins, and the idea of an NFT doesn't shock them, right? Like, owning a digital asset and paying to own that. The only real difference now is that the custody of that asset can't be taken from you.
Yeah, which is a really difficult concept to explain to someone, right? It's like, I've bought it, but it could be taken away from me. That whole thing is like really difficult so someone who's non-digitally, who doesn't understand the underlying technology, to just be like, that could happen. Like, if the game disappears, all of your prizes all of your skins, all of your things, that they just, like, the server's going to be turned off. You're not going to have them anymore. Like that. Oftentimes when you're like young, you don't see that technology becomes legacy, it becomes obsolete, and it disappears. And not having like some place that record exists, you just be like, oh, like, where's history? Where's your history of objects and things that mattered to you, if it's not kept on top of a public ledger? I'm going to, Kevin, how would you explain decentralized finance to your parents? How would you explain it to a 5-year-old?
I mean, I think a lot of the things that Joe just said, he kind of stole my thunder there. But to my parents, I think it really does come down to what the bank is and why you need a bank. It's a fundamental change in that paradigm of thinking that you need to store stuff in the bank for it to be secure, and you need to let the bank do things with your own money. You don't need to do that. You can be in custody of your funds while having access to all of the yields that a bank would have with your own money. And I think that's a powerful thing that lots of people don't realize yet, especially people like my parents, that if you just keep your money in a bank, it's probably just sitting there being taxed. Well, it's not probably, it is just sitting there being taxed at a few percentage points every single year, just for sitting there doing nothing. And you're being taxed for holding your money steady, which is a pretty bad thing. And DeFi changes that. It's more about education in a lot of ways rather than just fundamentally the technology. It just education-wise, and then also makes it easy. What do I do if I'm in traditional finance? Okay, so I have a bunch of money. Where do I go? And it's pretty complicated. There's like, money advisors, and they'll tell you to put it here and there, and it's kind of complicated. And I think a lot of what DeFi is doing is also innovating on the UIs, which is just saying, forget about these complex things. Here's a simple app. Put your money here. You'll get yields. And that's a pretty interesting thing to tell them about what DeFi can do. As far as a 5-year-old, I don't know. I mean, I guess banks can be pretty bad, and DeFi solves that, but it's far from perfect, and it's has a lot of its own problems yet. So, yeah, I'm not quite sure.
Have you managed to get your parents to put any money into DeFi yet?
No, not yet. Mostly because I am myself still a little bit hesitant, purely because there is just a lot of danger around it. My parents are the last people that I would want to put, in risk of having their money lost. But with that said, it's actually getting significantly better, and it's
right.
Quite impressive just how much we've evolved. But then again, products like Aave, they're getting so good. They've only been out there for 2 years now,
right.
really in production, and it's just it's still super early on. So a little bit more time for them to really get established, and I think it goes to the really conservative, and then it can become viable to the really conservative, conservative money-wise people in traditional finance.
Awesome, Jonas.
Yeah, so maybe more just some tongue-in-cheek answers to how I would explain it to my parents. I might say, remember back in the day when your bank used to give you interest? That's DeFi now. Now you can actually get interest in DeFi. I might say, I actually remember when I was a little kid going into the bank with my mom she opened a new account, and she got a toaster. They were actually giving away devices that you could get for opening accounts. And I might say, remember when you used to get a toaster for opening a bank account? Those are governance tokens now. Just if you if you open an account on one of these platforms, they're going to give you a toaster, but it's going to be a governance token.
It's going to be a share of the underlying thing. You're going to own part of it.
It's better than a toaster,
right,
I guess.
Right.
And then I might say, how your retirement account is invested in Vanguard. Well, that's kind of what we're trying to do at Sacred DAO these days. We're trying to build these index products that let you get a share of everything at lower risk and lower cost and things like that. And as far as explaining it to kids, I have a 14-year-old son who has been mining Ethereum on his gaming PC for a while now.
Nice.
So he totally gets it, I think. He hasn't done anything too degen with it yet because fees are too high, but at least they're paying attention for sure.
It's really cool. And Mark, how about yourself?
Well, about my parents, my father is a degen, like an actual one. We do 20x future leverage trading on Binance. Get wrecked sometimes, and call me and say a lot of good things about CZ, but it's like just one of us. But it was easy. My father is an engineer, and I joined Ethereum in 2015. It took him a while to get inside it, but late 2018 he get inside the ecosystem, and now it's like even more degen than me on many stuff. My mother is not an engineer. my mother technical ability or computer skills is just TikTok on her iPhone and Facebook on her MacBook, and that's it. So that's a bit harder. I tried to show her the Argent wallet, which is like super easy, things like that, but still too complex because you have to create an account, seed phrase, all these kind of things. Like the first thing when you discover crypto or DeFi in general, the first thing they tell you is like, please write down those 20 or 24 random words. If you lose that word, you lose all your money. How scary is that? Like, how crazy is
terrifying.
that? It's terrifying. Like all your life, you've been to the bank, you have like a nice person, a nice lady or a nice lad that tells you your money is safe with us. And the alternative to that is take these words, don't lose it, or you lose your money. Like, we have to do better. And we crazy need to do better. And there's already like better alternatives. So I talked about the Argent wallet on mobile, which is super cool. Zengo, for example, also super good, super easy to onboard there. Another a good example that is brand new, it's TechDAO. So not StakerDAO, but TechDAO. And they have like this new onboarding method that you can basically join with an email. They will send you an email. You will confirm. You will have the full Web2 experience. So obviously it's not completely decentralized. And they have this idea of a starter pack. So they have like on-ramp with Transact and Ramp Networks, this kind of provider. And you can buy your first $200 of crypto. So obviously the fee will not be the most optimized or these kind of things. But with this kind of experience, you are 10 minutes away from your first experience into DeFi, because they will deliver you asset directly on Polygon, and you are one click away to do your first yield farming, which can be any kind of strategy they have, but it is super interesting to reach that point. That level of seamlessness to get inside the ecosystem was not even possible to think about it 2 years ago. And I really believe that 2 years from now, it will be super easy. And we are slowly reaching the point that you talked about your son a bit earlier, that it will be 100 times easier for someone that reach the financial world to get into DeFi than traditional finance. Because I have to believe that things like Zapify, like StakeDAO, or what's the name again? Zerion, they are much easier to access for someone who discovered the financial world than traditional finance, like all the paperwork that you need to do to open bank accounts. Like opening a bank account, you need your identity, you need everything. You need to take an actual appointment to go somewhere to do these kind of things, and it's too complex for people. So I have the belief that there's a full generation that will not ask themselves what is decentralized finance or traditional finance. DeFi will be finance to them.
I think it's definitely true, and we're starting to see the early sort of like signs of improved user experience, usability. In terms of like, I have a 2.5-year-old, so it's not 5 yet. But I was just thinking, like, because I didn't actually think about the question myself, and then I was like, well, how would I answer that? I would probably say, like, you get pocket money, right? Like, yeah, I get pocket money, right? You get pocket money. When you're not using that pocket money, it's just sitting in daddy's wallet, right? It's just sitting in daddy's wallet. What if you could lend that out securely and you would get extra money whilst you weren't using it? Would you be interested in that? Yeah, that sounds great. And that's kind of it's like a slightly less patronizing version, is sort of like kind of what I've spoken with my parents about, but they've still been like, I get it. It's like, cool, do you want to do it? And I'm like, no. Okay, fine. But like my wife's parents live in Switzerland, and there's negative interest rates in the bank, which is insane. You have to pay to keep your money in the bank account. So like they got it, and they were like, yeah, cool, like show me how it works. So that's been really interesting. But that does bring us on to one of the audience questions, which is like, And then a combination of two, like what needs to happen for DeFi to become more accessible to the average person, aka why is the UI UX in crypto universally bad? So let's kick that off with Kevin.
The question is, why is UI bad?
Well, question is what it's a combination of two. What needs to happen for DeFi to become accessible to the average person? Better wallets, no seed phrases, more security, and then just like the related. I think what is related to this is user experience, but like that's the main question. What needs to happen for DeFi to become more
it needs
accessible?
to become informationally more digestible. This is before you even get the UIs done right. You need to have a careful thinking around what is it that exactly you're trying to give to the user. What are you trying to express to the user? If it's just yields, you got to make it really simple that if you deposit your money here, then you're going to be getting this amount of returns. Is it risk-free? Is there a risk involved with it? What is the catch? All of this needs to be very easy to digest. And then I think the UIs come in pretty naturally after that. But there's a few products out there that make it pretty simple. Obviously, Avi being one of those, but the rest tend to be pretty complicated. And to the extent that all of this is, reduced down to very simple, here's what this does, here's what this gives you, nothing else, nothing more, and here's what the risk associated with it is, then I think that's the biggest limiting factor to getting into DeFi. A lot of people, like, just the fact that we have to call it DeFi, frankly, it's a little bit confusing. What the hell is DeFi? We have to talk about DeFi in the first place. So like there was already a lot of complexities that we're adding to this simple process of, here's a bunch of interest rates that you can get, here's a bunch of yields you can get. And so, the space is just it is rife with a lot of complex verbiage and a lot of complex wording, complex protocols, and it's this is the big limiting factor to getting, I think, bigger money in, and especially the broad audiences of my parents in, for example.
That's really interesting. All right, Jonas.
Sure. So I would say that number one, we are still obviously really early, right? We're still in the first inning here of the Web3 revolution. We're even 100 million users as our initial goal here for GoodFi. Like that's still pre-crossing the chasm, if you will, right? Like all 100 million users are still early adopters, right? That's not really mainstream yet. I personally believe that there is a significant element of that it's just going to take time for Web3 natives to start to have the money to do this stuff. This is like crypto-based finance is going to be a fundamentally different way that people manage their money in the 21st century than people did in the 20th century. And we're not going to pull the big banks over, and we're not going to pull the retirees over. There's going to be around the edges, we will, but it's going to be a whole new platform for a whole new generations to come, I think.
So we're sort of like we're waiting for the money to come through to the generations and those to come onto the platforms rather than sort of get the old money onto the new platform. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's go to Mark.
Well, there's a few reasons. Right now, it's too expensive. It's too complex. And it's too centralized. Well, it's funny to say decentralized finance is centralized. It's not centralized in the terms of the protocol. They are trustless. They are permissionless. They are decentralized. But how do you get there? And how do you get from there? How do you have like $20 inside your wallet and convert that $20 into $20 of value inside a DeFi protocol? The answer is that you need to use your bank, traditional bank, then do a wire transfer from your traditional bank to a centralized exchange most of the time, or an on-ramp application that are completely centralized. And then you need to do some action to convert that fiat currency into crypto assets, speculative or not, and then withdraw from that centralized exchange to a public network. And most of the time on those centralized exchange, you will not have access to the cheapest and the fastest networks, such as Avalanche. It's very hard to withdraw from there. It's the same thing with Polygon. It's the same thing with Phantom. If I'm a Binance user and I want to withdraw to Phantom, I'm not even sure that's an option right now. I might need to withdraw to Ethereum, so pay a lot of transaction fee, and then take a bridge from Ethereum to Phantom, the Phantom network. That will cost me a lot of fees as well, which sucks completely. And adoption relies on those kind of centralized exchanges. So we don't need to bypass them completely, because centralized exchanges are trading venues, and trading is important, because if there's no volume and no traders, you cannot buy or sell anything without like a huge price impact of this thing. But we need alternative, like direct on-ramp, direct way to go from fiat to crypto and from crypto to fiat, or more ways as well to directly spend crypto. Like if you have USDC, why would you want USD? If you find people willing to accept, or if you have like a debit cards inside your wallet that you can charge up with USDC, what would you want USD? Just use your Visa card and pay with it, like everything else you do with your Visa card. And that's the experience we needed. And what I have to say is that until very recently, the network was not good enough. Because on a public blockchain, the block size is limited. So the number of transactions you can do is not very large. And that's very important. And there's good reason to that. It's the security, it's the decentralization, it's a whole range of things. But we are coming up right now, this year, with a full range of solutions. They can be alternative layer ones, they can be layer 2 solution, they can be whatever we call scalability solution that will allow to have more user, more seamless experience. And once we know that we are reaching that, I think the bottleneck are becoming overcome, and now we will reach the point that we are talking about DeFi to become more accessible.
Very cool. Okay. And Joseph, what about yourself? What do you think needs to happen for DeFi to become more accessible to the average person?
Sure. The user experience for gas is unacceptable right now. Not just the expense, but just having to pay it, and like how you pay it, and gas pricing and using a wallet is ridiculous. If you've used Flow, or tried out anything, they're the one chain that's understanding the end user, like the kind of this broad, unsophisticated user. Flow understands that really well, and so like our whole like gas UX, right? Then we're getting gas pricing into MetaMask, and like the user may or may not understand that. I know that I didn't understand gas pricing for a long time, probably until DeFi Summer. I was just kind of like, oh, whatever, just put it in and send it.
Max.
Yeah, right. And now it's like becoming a problem, but still like gas pricing and the fact that you have to pay gas on transactions is like confusing for the user. And so like any thing like gas relaying that can obfuscate that from the end user is going to be great. Although the fees are still high, which is why I say like L2s are really important. And then on top of the L2s, like kind of like fast finality, fast transactions are really important to keep kind of like the flow, right? Like imagine that you clicked on a button on a website, and then it was like, okay, sending, and then eventually getting there, and like that just doesn't make any sense, right? Like the front end should should hide this from the user and kind of like create like a predictability, right? And then like if there's a revert, which is like we're assuming that L2 like works at this point, right? Like the predictability for the user is that like kind of, yes, that transaction went through, it was good, we like pre-ran it, unless there's like a reversion, everything like continues operating the way that it should.
Yeah, I have this. I have the same thing with MetaMask. I think it's it's a completely unacceptable user experience. It's just we accept it because what came before was even worse, and now we're like, oh, this is great. It's like, no, it's not. It's asking you to sign something, but it doesn't tell you what you're signing. It just like 0x like binary bits. When you click it, it doesn't. It just disappears. You're like, did it work? Where's my money gone? And like then you have this terrifying wait, which is unacceptable. But like all of these bits don't hold your hand, don't tell you what's going on.
100%. And then the last thing is fiat on ramps, right? Like the chasm between somebody who has like 1 GUI and somebody who has 0 GUI is huge. And so like getting people on, and the problem is not on our side, the problem is on traditional banking side. They have like a long they have a long period of like transaction reversibility, and so we can't guarantee funds on our side because they can't guarantee funds on their side. And so that's just going to be a problem for, I think, the time being. I think like Visa and MasterCard getting into the game is going to be very interesting because they're the network, and they have control over what the merchant card processors do. They can guarantee that something will not be able to be reverted. But I haven't heard any talk. Like that would be the most valuable service that they could ever give to decentralized finance. But I haven't heard any talk about that. It's just like kind of like, we're going to do money movement with USDC. Great. Give us transactions that can't be charged back, and so that people can get money into DeFi right away, and you will be, lauded as the hero of DeFi.
So they actually do allow that in their systems. Like the non-reversible transaction type is a transaction type in every single card network. It just is only permitted for certain types of transactions, such as FX. Buying FX currency is a non-reversible transaction if it's bought via a broker dealer who has a non-reversible transaction type. So we'll get there. There's a button in the system. We're just not being given access to it. And I think that's universally true of crypto in general. It's really difficult to bank yourself as a crypto company. It's really difficult to even interface with the everyday banking system. And like people, there's stories all the time of people getting their bank accounts closed down because they took a crypto transaction. They withdrew some money from Coinbase. And this is now a stock market listed company. It is absolutely insane. The other part of it is I still think that private keys, seed phrasing, the way that we do your keys, your money, but if you lose it, then that's it, is actually still unacceptable as a user experience. I think that's already been said, but just to put some numbers on it, $140 billion to date has been lost as a result of lost keys. And that's a sizable percentage of the total crypto market capitalization, which is insane. Now, obviously, a lot of that comes from Bitcoin that was lost earlier and now is worth ridiculous amounts of money. But I think that's one of the big things that needs changing, and something that I think there's some good solutions like Argent, but Argent has its own problems about how expensive it is to use and how buggy it is and stuff like that. There's a question from Crypto Penguin. Do you want to jump in and ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's a real honor to be here in the presence of such great DeFi titans. I think we're really making history here, right? The wheel, the light bulb, the internet, the DeFi, and and we're here right now. We're on the forefront. So it's decentralized finance, right? So, I mean, do you have to be a coder? Do you have to be like a really smart programmer in order to participate in decentralized finance? Or what can the viewer right now, someone who's watching this right now, the average person, the average Joe, what can they do to help us reach that goal of 100 million users in DeFi?
Who do you want to take that first?
Well, the first thing is to use it, to try it. I really believe that we learn best by trying things. And the good thing is that now we have new kinds of networks, so you don't have to spend your whole net worth to just pay transaction fee. So you just can decide what is a good entry point for you and try the thing. And I think that will make a difference already, because we talked like for 1 hour and 20 minutes, but I think like spending 5 minutes on Sushi or on Aave or on any platform will speak volumes about what is actually happening. And the second thing is that no, you don't need to be a coder and a developer to participate in DeFi, because decentralized finance means also decentralized governance. And what is really important and what is really needed is actually your opinion on all that. Like you can go to Sushi and there's going to be a forum and there's SIP, so Sushi Improvement Proposal there all the time. And you can decide and basically participate and voice your opinion of what should be the next cool things that Joseph is working on. And you can do the same thing with me on the governance.aave.com. I'm pretty sure you can do the same thing with Kevin at some point, and everyone in this panel. And I think it's really important because you cannot be truly decentralized if you don't have a diverse group of actors interacting and confronting their opinion together. And you don't need to write a single line of code to do that. I can assure you.
Thank you, Mark. Jonas?
Yeah, I echo that, Mark. There's a with all these DeFi platforms, most of them or many of them have turned into DAOs, as we just mentioned briefly earlier. DAOs have governance tokens that get distributed to end users, and those governance tokens can actually be used to govern. And for our project, for StakerDAO, yes, we would love to have people come and help us set strategy for what the future products should be, how the current products should change, how the fees should be distributed. All those questions can be very much non-technical from a discussion perspective. So there's lots of opportunities. That and you know what? There's even marketing needed among these DAOs, right? And there's a bounty program on many DAOs like StakerDAO, where if you want to come and create a meme or write an article or create a video, there's even ways to participate by doing that.
Awesome. Joseph?
At this stage, there's nothing here that's unsurmountable or insurmountable. I think any user who comes up and has intent to understand and use, it's like 100% accessible. There were times that it was not 100% accessible. We're not going to catch everybody with that, with this sort of like framework. Like you have to really have intent, right? And like the end user is like kind of fickle, and you want something that kind of anybody can approach, right? Like at any time, and use it simply kind of the way that you use a Web 2.0 app or the way you use your bank. That the long term, I think that's the goal, but in the near term, like you don't have to have any sort of specialized skill to do this.
Awesome. Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I'm one layer below the application layer. The folks here could probably speak better to that. I'm more interested in the infrastructure part. I can speak more to it. But as far as bringing in 100 million users, I think a lot of the things that have already been said are dead on. Education is very important. Improving, you don't need to be a coder, so you just need to go out there and tell people how to use these things, how these things work, what are the risks associated with them. Just make people feel more at home with using Aave or Sushi or any of the other platforms out there, rather than them go to centralized exchanges and centralized money lenders and so on. Just educate about what the risks involved, make them feel at ease, make them feel that this is actually a really interesting alternative to what you're currently using, and a more powerful one. And I think that goes a long way. So education and marketing is probably the single biggest missing piece as far as I see in adoption of DeFi at scale.
So no, I agree with everyone. Like, you don't need to be a coder to be able to use DeFi, but what people need to do today is go out and advocate, go out and like you're passionate enough to be watching this. You're passionate enough to be involved in the crypto community, but it is not a full-gone conclusion yet that this is all going to win. Like, this is still to some extent a fragile movement. As Jonas was saying, we are before 100 million users, and even 100 million users, it hasn't passed into the mainstream yet. And like, people, you need to be going and telling people, informing people about what the opportunities are, helping them get started, get over that first hump of setting up a hardware wallet, or first hump of actually getting MetaMask and showing them how to interact. Like, I know I was harping on about how bad MetaMask is as a user experience, but there's also all of the beautiful things in terms of once you got your crypto funds, you have a universe of applications open to you, and it's on board once and get access to everything. And that as a paradigm for the average user, where they're not like, oh, I don't have to create an account for every single thing that I want. I just access by authenticating with my Web3 wallet, and suddenly I can choose to be anywhere in any application, in any opportunity, and move between it instantly. And yes, gas fees are a problem, fundamentally a problem for the industry. It's why Avalanche exists, why Radix exists, it's why Layer 2s, and they're coming. The solutions are coming, but we need more people to come in and get excited about the movement and go and advocate to other people, go and preach to other people, because fundamentally this only happens because we believe in it. In the same way that so many massive movements were started in, around the world by humanity, it happens as a result of a crowd of believers pushing it forwards until it becomes an actuated reality. So that's what I'd say to the audience. Go out and go preach the good gospel of DeFi and of crypto and of self-sovereignty of your money, and get people using. And don't just do the thing of being like, oh, go download MetaMask. But like, let me sit down with you. And let's go use Aave for the first time. Let's go use SushiSwap for the first time. Let's go Pangolin for the first time, and get people excited and part of the movement. I think that is everything for today. I want to say a massive thank you to Jonas from StakerDAO, from Kevin from Avalanche, from Joseph from SushiSwap, and Mark from Aave. Thank you so much to the Birb Nest for organizing the streaming and getting everyone together and letting this happen. And thank you to everyone for being part of GoodFi and making sure it happens. And thank you to everyone for listening. It's been a fantastic panel. Really enjoyed it. I hope you guys have too.
Likewise. Thank you all.
Thank you.
It was an honor to be here in this panel with you guys. And if you want to learn more about GoodFi, there's a website. There's goodfi.com.
That's right.
And, there's a nice little tool there. It explains what DeFi is. There's a nice little tool that tells you like how do you get started. And let me share that actually. How do you want to get started on with DeFi? And you can, I think you can share this to like the new person, right?
Absolutely.
What the benefits are, how you should get started.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what you should do. Right? That's a good starting point, I think. If you want to learn more, I love learning about all this new tech and trying out new stuff. So if you want to learn more about that with me, I'm at the Birb Nest, so you can check us out at thebirbnest.com. Sorry, I want to just share it here. You can come here, right? And then you can go here.
That's the beauty. So this is the first version of it. So it allows you it matches you up with the most suitable starting points. And then the next version of the website is also going to show you the most common crypto assets and the most common crypto platforms to help you work out where you should get started in DeFi. So this is just explaining what DeFi is and how it works, and letting you sort of decide how you should start with where you should get your money, whether or not you should buy crypto directly from the wallet or buy it on Coinbase. And then the next version that's coming soon is also, we call it the DeFi Matchmaker, and it's going to help you find your perfect DeFi application to get started with, which will be showing all of the best places to put your money in and make some money on top of it.
I love it.
Thanks, Phil.
That's a good tip, right? You customize the message for your whoever you're helping, right? Do you have $50? Do you have $5,000? And then you try to help them, guide them, however whatever makes sense for them, and don't just say here's the link, go figure it out. All right, as I was saying, so if you want to learn more about GoodFi, go to goodfi.com. You want to learn more about the Birb Nest, we have some promotions on our subscriptions right now and our trading services and trading education. Visit us at birbnest.com. Discounts prices are going up tomorrow. And we actually have another stream coming up. So if you want to check that out, we're at thebirbnest.com/YouTube. And thank you all for joining us today. Bye, guys.
Bye, guys. Thank you.
Bye.